Welcome to the creative extreme, where imagination without limitation is the only expectation.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 3 of the Abbott and the Artista. I'm Christopher Ickpo, aka the Artista, with.
Defon Thomas, aka the Abbott.
Yep, and
How's it
thanks
going?
again for. I'm doing good, man. It's been a crazy one. It's been all over the place. We had a wild storm here last night. I mean, almost like it looks like Twister, the movie Twister. Like, thank God our house wasn't touched. I mean, the tent in the
Wow.
backyard that the kids, were in over the on 4th of July, that was flatlined. We didn't lose it. And the Oklahoma Joe smoker grill cover was trapped underneath the tent. Thank God, so we didn't lose that either. Um, but man, I was going to the gym this morning. There were massive trees
Mm,
completely uprooted from the ground. It looked straight up looked like some
man.
movie. Trees were cracked in half, fell on top of cars. Cars. It looked like an action scene, man. Like Batman
Wow.
had and Superman had went through the streets and windows bashed in, car roofs, dented, folded in half. It was insane outside this morning. But again, thank God none of our stuff, our house or anything got damaged. So, but literally right
Yeah.
outside our front, door, right outside our fence, giant tree just laid out.
Wow.
Um,
Wow.
yeah,
That's
yeah, it
crazy,
was
man.
crazy. It was crazy.
Well, I'm glad everybody's all right. I'm glad
Yeah,
everybody's okay.
yeah, thank God. So,
Yeah.
speaking of crazy though, we got to play a crazy place to pick up from where we left off last time in
Yeah. Yeah.
Project 365. And
Yeah. Go.
so we talked about Noble, right? And
Yeah.
he was amid some action right before he got picked up by Cliche and taken to Sir Velacor's library.
Right. Yeah.
The action that he was in. Jump it off, man. Tell him what Noble was, was,
It
was getting into.
was the wildest. So Platinum City, which is our major city, which we already talked about a little bit, but I don't know how much we've gotten into.
Recap.
We
Recap.
haven't gotten super deep into
Yeah.
the lore of Platinum City. So we'll have to do that at some point. But Platinum City being our big major city in the middle of the United States, a giant city where a lot of our heroes and characters get their start, and that's where the story of Platinum of Project 265 begins. At this point, Captain Noble is flying all around. He's tracking Ramses Hondo. He's trying to take down the elite. He's trying to stop Ramses from doing all kinds of villainous stuff. Uh, Everything from putting alien grade weapons into the hood to global domination plans. Like Ramses,
Wow.
no crimes, no crime or illegal activity is too big or too small
Right.
for Ramses Hondo, the Pharaoh. He gets it in. So while Noble is chasing down all of these characters and all of these villains, he's also having to deal with other global things that are happening, other crimes, other phenomenon that are happening. And one of these wow phenomenon comes from a character named Sarcophagus. Sarcophagus is a kind of like a living mummy.
Right. Right.
He's
Yeah.
he is the
Egyptian
Walking Dead.
deity kind of thing.
Yeah, kind of a deity. I don't know if
Yeah.
we've ever truly categorized what sarcophagus is,
Right.
but sarcophagus. So there is this project going on inside of Platinum City where you can, when you pass away, instead of just being buried in a coffin or cremated or those traditional things, you can be you can have your body wrapped up into, I don't know how to describe it,
It's
like
like
a
it's
like a
like a
tr-
capsule of your remains along with a plant seed or roots
Right.
of a tree. So when you
Yeah.
biodegrade all your nutrients in your body and all that stuff,
Right.
helps infuse this tree to grow and all. It's like, an
Yeah.
organic recycling of your remains, essentially.
Yeah, organic. Yeah, you can choose to have that done to your body. So there's all these trees in Platinum City that are grown from this mix that Christopher was talking about.
Thousands. We're talking hundreds, thousands
Thousands,
of trees.
hundreds, thousands. I mean, because it also becomes a way for um recycling. It sounds so cold to say it that way, but it is. It's the same, in the same vein of donating your body to science, where you give to medical schools and research, et cetera, et cetera. It's kind of the same program. So uh Sarcophagus decides today is the day that I'm gonna make some mess, right? And so he comes into town, and he's like the Night King
Game of
from Game
Thrones.
of Thrones. He begins to raise people from the dead out of these trees, just all over Platinum City.
Yeah.
And
Instant zombie apocalypse.
instant zombie apocalypse in Platinum City, the most populated city in the world, along with the the most amount of these trees that are also biodegrading bodies. So
Right.
all of these half half biodegraded bodies. I can't think of the word right now, but these when a body becomes decomposed, all of
Yes.
these half decomposed bodies
Yeah.
are coming out, and they're causing havoc, and they're all over the place. So the heroes of Platinum City have to try and stop them. So they come in, and they're battling, and you have the Platinum City Knights, you have the City Watch, you have the Sister Clique, you just have all these different heroes and law enforcement and government
Mhm.
agencies trying to stop this zombie apocalypse being led by Sarcophagus. Uh, so this is
Along
the
with,
this is
though, I mean, think about it too. Oxymbrolic right there with the police, but you also got
Ox.
Blunt, you also got Spliff, you
You
also
got
got Yo-Yo, you also got
right.
Lala, you got all
Yeah,
the others, anti-hero or even criminals, even the bad guys
criminals
are
are
fighting
trying to
the
help out.
zombies because it's an all-out battle royale.
To
The
know,
living versus
yeah,
the undead, you
the
know?
living versus the undead. Absolutely. So it's going crazy, and Sarcophagus is running rampant. So Sarcophagus being the heroes and the some of those kind of street level characters, they can handle the zombies. It's just a matter of punching a lot of heads and trying to rip them apart. However, Sarcophagus is this supernatural being, so you got to bring in some of the big guns to deal with him. Hence Captain Noble comes flying in, right? So Captain Noble, not only is he trying to battle Sarcophagus, he's also, at the time, he's actually chasing Fiasco. There's
Yeah.
this character named Fiasco who is kind of, and he's a little bit jokerish, kind of a prince of mischief kind of
Yeah.
thing. And he's booby trapped the world is his big thing. He has gone and put booby traps all over the planet to blow things up, to cause floods, to contaminate water sources. Basically, he has set up these booby traps so that anytime he is getting pursued by a superhero or by law enforcement or by a vigilante, he can set off one of his booby traps and get
Cover the
away
escape.
and
Yeah.
cover his escape. So this guy has thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of booby traps just all over the world. It's a wild situation. Um, and he's doing some mess, and Captain Noble's trying to stop Fiasco. He's trying to battle Sarcophagus, and as in the midst of this, he gets swept off to Sir Velacor's library,
Yep.
leaving the rest of the heroes to battle this this zombie apocalypse. In the midst of this, there's this hero named Frequency. Frequency has a very unique power where whenever he kind of has um a lot of like fighting skills. I think he's kind of a boxer, brawler type
Yeah.
character. But the idea is that when he hits you, it's not just one hit. That hit that he hits you with repeatedly keeps hitting you. It's just like the effect of it keeps happening. So if he punches you in the chest, it's going to feel like you got punched in the chest like 1,000 times. It's like, just so he's pretty formidable. It's a simple, kind of a simple street level power, but it's multiplied over and over again,
You
So
don't want to scrap with frequency. Like that's
you
not
don't want to.
that you want to get into it with. Just let him be.
so So Frequency, fortunately, is a hero. And when he sees that this apocalypse is going on, he kisses his wife, Tamara, goodbye and says, well, not goodbye, but he says, hey, I need to go out and fight this zombie apocalypse. So he gets out there and he's battling. Now, Frequency is an African American male. And at the time we created this character, there was a lot of tension, and there still is. It's gotten somewhat better here in 2024,
Yeah.
where there's not as many instances of police brutality being documented. But at the time we were having that discussion in the country a lot about police brutality, unarmed Black men getting shot. And it was also a theme in, I saw a couple, I guess, comedy skits about it. There's this comedy skit with Kevin Hart on SNL, and he plays this Black superhero who's driving in his kind of Batmobile type car. And then he gets pulled over by the police, and it's like they're profiling him. Because he's Black, but he's like, "But I'm a superhero. I'm trying to fight crime."
Yeah.
And so anyway, Frequency is trying. I think the story was that there was a woman
With her 2 kids.
who, and her 2 kids, they were getting attacked by the zombies. Frequency comes in there, goes to work, bam, 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 hits them up.
Also have to include it's a white woman with her 2 white children.
There were 2 white children
attacked by the zombies. Okay, so keep going.
Get attacked by the zombies. He takes out the zombies, but in the chaos of it all, the police come in and they think that he is attacking her. So, there's a lot of confusion and a lot of chaos going on. But at the end of the day, they saw what they believed to be a Black man attacking a white woman.
Yep. Also key to note, when Frequency goes to work, he likes to wear his headphones. He likes to listen to his music.
That's
He's
right.
got his soundtrack when he's putting in work. So he's got the headphones on because he just got done, putting in that work. All right. So, all right. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. He's got the headphones. So he doesn't hear the police coming up behind him. He doesn't hear any of their commands. And he's in the zone. So by the time he turns around, they've opened fire and they have killed our man Frequency.
Well, I think in the story, he turns around to leave because he sees they're okay, and they're like, "Oh, thank you so much, thank you so much." He turns around, doesn't realize the cops are there because he has his headphones on. He just turns around, sees them pointing guns at him and everything. He's saying, "I can't hear you," right? Gestures, goes to take the headphones off. That's when they unloaded on him and shot him and killed him, despite the pleas from the white woman who was there saying,
"That's right,
helping us. He saved us." And the chaos of everything, they still ended up shooting him anyways.
Yeah, and so now Sarcophagus is in the vicinity, and he sees, I can raise dude from the dead, and I can have a superpowered zombie on my team. And so he does that. Frequency wakes up, and now Frequency is a superpowered zombie. He proceeds to go to work on the cops that just shot him, and he begins to maul them to death.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and so now we are in this situation. Okay, so then how does he get? Who was the character? There's a character that takes him out of his possession.
So it
It
was it
is
was McFlon.
McLon. That's right.
Bruja. Yeah.
Ruha, the character. Yeah, go ahead.
So while all the stuff is going on with Noble at Sir Velacor's library and everything, right? This is going on in Platinum City. And Frequency's he's wreaking havoc. I mean, a super powered zombie. The heroes are having a problem with them. The police are having a problem with them. And so they're basically all just kind of going after him, right? And McLon, real name Dr. Lucia Yanez, of Aztec ancestry. She is a witch, essentially. She's got magical powers. She is the combination of Laura Croft and Indiana Jones. She travels the world, finds incredible artifacts, medallions, things with magical powers and all this kind of stuff. And she's also one of the world's foremost archaeologists, historians, and a top tier professor at Platinum City University. She's witnessing everything that's going on. She's out there putting in work, trying to help save
And
the people,
and
save the
she has
city.
a connection to the underworld and the afterlife.
Yes, yes,
She
she
can
is.
commune with it.
Yes, yes, exactly. And so,
One of her powers.
so when she realizes what frequency is now, the connection between the underworld, him being undead, also having been a hyper being, having these powers, she realizes the urgency. We got to rectify this, right? We have to reset whatever's going on here because if we don't, this is going to be chaos across the nation. So she goes into work, ends up, long story short, ends up using an incantation and a special medallion that she has in her possession when she, actually gets to frequency and is able to reverse what Sarcophagus did to him. And so but he doesn't go back to being dead. He's alive again.
He's alive again.
Same frequency as he was before he was killed, with all the memories of being killed and all the memories
Yeah.
of everything he was doing while he was a zombie, but he's alive again, right? With his powers and everything still intact. So she comes in and saves the day, right? So take it over.
Yeah, and then so now yes, so the day has been saved, the zombie apocalypse has been quelled for the most part, and they're in the aftermath of it all. Frequency is back. I think he's at home with his
Yep.
wife at the
With
time.
Tamara,
And
yeah.
with Tamara, there's a knock on the door, and the police come in, and they're like, "Hey, man, you're under arrest." And he's like, "For what?" And they're like, "For killing police officers during the zombie apocalypse." And he's like, "Well, I was a zombie at the time." And they're like, "You still did it." And him being the stand-up guy he is, well, I'm going to cooperate
Right.
because my name will eventually be cleared.
Cleared.
And so he goes and he's put in prison. I don't think we ever told the story of the trial in
Not
Project
the whole story.
365.
We didn't go
Not
into
the whole
detail.
story.
Yeah.
We didn't go into detail. Man, we really might have to do Project 365 Part 2.
Extended version behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes. Like it runs parallel with Part 1 rather than the sequel,
Right.
because the sequel has to be something way
Project
different.
365 Under the Bridges, something like that,
Under
right?
the Bridges. I love it. Under the Bridges. I'm writing that down right now. Under the Bridges. And it could be, because we could dive into all this a little bit more detail. But so now it asks all these questions. Can you be charged with a crime if you committed it while you were undead under the spell of a supernatural evil being / spirit? Can you be held accountable for those crimes?
Right. So they go and
discuss amongst yourselves.
he retains Greenwood, Archer, and Pine.
I believe so. Yeah.
Which are the Platinum City Knights.
City Knights. Yep.
During the day they take on these kind of cases and they argue in court that not only was he under the influence of a supernatural villainous, magical demon sort of whatever sarcophagus is. So he was undead. He was not only was he undead, he was possessed, right? So it wasn't just like he was undead and had free will. He was also
Yeah.
possessed and had free will, right? Then at the same time, they're arguing, and he was unjustly killed in the first place. Let's
Right.
not forget he was gunned down after saving a mother and her two children unjustly by Platinum City Police. So they're arguing all this in court. And again, long story short, he ends up being found not guilty. He ends up, getting released and going home to Tamara and everything. But that story, man, that story. Every time at every con, every time we tell, like, what are some of your stories? What are some of your stories? It was always interesting to see spaces because the stages that people go through when we tell them the story, that particular
Yeah.
storyline, it's okay, they're interested, right? I'm listening, okay. Oh, there's a character, right? Oh, that's an interesting power. Okay. Oh, and there's a sarcophagus, okay. There's a character, or zombie apocalypse, right? I'm familiar with that. And oh, damn, so he was shot and killed? Oh man, that's terrible, right? I mean, because again,
Yeah.
we've all lived through it, right? Through the news, and some people, unfortunately, in their own communities. But then it's wait a minute, so sarcophagus brings it back to life. Wait a minute, he kills the police, so some kind of twisted justice. But then at the same time, wait a minute, he gets saved and he's human again. He gets reunited with his wife, but then he's a cop killer now, so he gets arrested. He gets dragged back, but then he's got to go to court. And then, but how could you try him for something when he was possessed and he was a zombie? And so just seeing the phases and
It's the roller coaster of emotions, man.
right that people go through. It's one of my favorite stories that we did. But man,
Yeah,
that joint,
that's a crazy one.
boy,
That I can't wait to have the opportunity to do that in some type of animated or live action.
yeah,
Because if we haven't mentioned it already, we're trying to make these into TV shows and movies. That's the goal. So
yeah,
it's a so I can't wait to play with that, and as we develop it deeper and we get to actually play with the dialogue of the situation and the and just how to speak to it, especially again. I mean, at this point, the story is almost 9 years, right? 8 years
eight,
old. We did it
8 years
in
old, yeah,
2016. Things have changed to a certain extent. Some people
right,
can argue whether it's for the better or for the worse, but we know that the discussion has changed a bit over these last 8 years. It's still there. It's still needs to be had. So as we in the creative process, this is always something that's interesting. Allow me to tangent just a little bit. But when you create a story at a certain time, storytellers who are trying to speak to the times that they're writing in, it's always a tricky thing because you want to try to tell timeless stories, but at the
yeah,
same time, you do want to try to speak to things that are current, things that are happening. You want to have that discussion, maybe make some type of statement
yeah,
in your storytelling. However, when you do that, if the story doesn't get discovered until years and years later, the
right,
discussion around the thing that you were speaking to at the time has changed.
yeah,
And now, so when we adapt this for the screen or for, something that's going to be even seen by even more people, now we have to take that into consideration as we redevelop the characters and redevelop
yeah,
the story. This is a really super interesting part of the creative process that I don't think I hear that many people talk about.
yeah,
um, I mean, granted, I haven't heard every creative talk about everything they do.
right,
But I listen to a lot of things about the creative process, about how people design their stories and design their projects. And sometimes you hear about that. Oh man, this screenplay was written back in like 1998 as this person's
right,
passion project, and he
right,
tried to pitch it. It never got picked up. then in 2021, someone's like, that's a great script. I want to make it. And
Yeah.
they have to adjust the story for 20 years later.
Yeah.
It's a real because they can't tell the same exact story that they wrote in 1998. The story is still powerful. The story can be timeless, but when it speaks to but if you want to speak to the times you're in, you kind of have to adjust the story a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
small
And
tangent.
it's like you said, it's a thing of infusing nonfiction into fiction that really comes up, right? I mean, we've heard stories of, Harry Potter and, J.K. Rowling taking the book to every publisher and their mother's publisher and getting shot down for God knows how long, and then eventually one takes a chance. Then we get the Potter universe, right? Queen's Gambit on Netflix, which I loved. I think that was written back in the 80s initially and was turned down an untold amount of times over decades. It gets picked up by one person. Next thing you know, we got a classic on Netflix. Those stories, though, right? Pure fiction. They have real life themes and everything, those universal themes that we all can relate to that have been around since the beginning of time. So it didn't matter that it took forever for those to get picked up.
Sure.
When you infuse that nonfiction into fiction, something that's time specific, like you said, then it gets picked up X amount of years later. Now you got to try to, like you said, adapt it. And I mean, unfortunately, that topic of police brutality and racial profiling and all those things, they're A, never going to be forgotten, and B, they are still relevant today. So let's not get it twisted, right?
Sure.
And that being a particular characteristic. And look, people, it's still a very polarizing time, right?
Sure.
We saw
Absolutely.
what happened, and we know what happened at the rally with former President Trump and the attempt on his life or alleged attempt on his life, whatever you want to say. But something happened, and it was very serious, right? It's the burgeoning political tensions in this country are resulting in things like that, which should never happen. Whether you're for them, against them, violence and things like that should never happen. But again, that's a characteristic of the country we live in, right? So fortunately for us, in a creative aspect, that political, racial, societal tension that we picked up and put into our stories in 2016, it's still prevalent today, right? Fortunately, unfortunately, on so many different levels, but that dichotomy is what makes the story still relevant and still interesting on so many levels. And and I think this is a good segue into getting into talking more about Platinum City and the lore and the mythology behind it, because people can say what they want to say about the United States of America, right? We have a bloody history. We have a sordid history as a nation. So do so many other nations and countries in this world.
Sure.
The United States of America, though, is unique in a whole different way than any of those other ones for so many different reasons. And that's a whole other, that's not even a podcast. That's a whole other course, 2-semester course that you would have to go, that we would have to have to go through that and do it justice. But for me, the United States of America is by far still the greatest country in the world. I don't care what anybody says. We have a ton of problems in this country. We have a lot of things that we need to work out as a community, also politically, economically, financially, just in every category. Check all the boxes. We got problems out the wazoo. But for me, there is no better place than the United States of America. And our country, this is our home, right? So when you take that and you put it into a creative project, and then you decide to turn it on its head and begin calling it the divided states of America, which is incredibly apt to again the times of today, right? But we're using it in a whole different way. Tell
Yeah.
people, after my little patriotic rant there, patriotic rant, tell the people what inspired you to come up with this version of the divided states of America around the formation of our megalopolis, our Gotham, our metropolis, our, central city, Platinum City. Talk.
So so I'll try to make this shortish. So we developed this story for Project 365 was started in 2016. It was a project in 2016. As we know, leading in up to 2016 it was an election year. And so 2015 had been full of very polarizing talk about elections, about presidential candidates. And in my mind, I agree. The United States is, a great country with a lot of problems. And it's okay for people to point out problems in a place you love. I mean, we do it in our families all the time, right? Just because we love our family doesn't mean we're not going to criticize or say something when they do something that is wrong. Like
Right.
I mean, we wouldn't do that, right? So right for us to criticize and ask for better from something that we love. That's
Right.
perfectly fine. And at the time, I personally was very frustrated with the amount of venom that was just beginning to take central to take a central place in our discord. It
Yeah.
was no longer, I remember back in the day, and maybe it was just because I was young or I was idealistic, but I thought that in the past, political discussions were at least civil to a to a certain extent. I know there's always been
Yeah.
I know politics has always been a dirty game. I know
Right.
there's always been a lot of different ways politicians manipulate us and set us against each other. I know that's always been a thing. I saw Hamilton. I mean, I'm joking. That's not the only place I can make this truth from. So that's not the only place. But to the point, right? Anyone who says that, man, today politics is crazy. What happened to when it was so civil? Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if you actually do the research behind all the stuff that was happening in the Hamilton musical, politicians been ragging on each other,
Yeah.
and
They've been, yeah.
it's been a dirty game ever since the birth of this nation, right? So, and that's just a people in power type of thing. People in power, they're gonna try to maintain power by any means necessary. It's that's, I don't think I'm saying anything controversial
Yeah.
when I
No.
say
It's all facts. That's facts.
that. So and I was getting very frustrated with the idea that we were becoming so polarized. And so the story of Platinum City, when I pitched it to Chris, the idea was that the country had become so polarized that people who did not believe the same thing could no longer live next to each other. It was just so bad that if my neighbor was of the opposite socio-political opinion, we could not coexist together, which
Yeah.
at that time, that's why in chapter one or volume one or day one of Project 365, January 1st, it starts with the Great Quake. The idea was that this huge earthquake happens that literally splits the country in half, physically splits the country in half. And there's this huge chasm that is runs from Mexico to Canada, and there's this chasm. All these people, millions of people die in this earthquake, where the pretty much the earth just collapsing on itself. We will later find out that there was a specific reason, not just the conditions of the socio-political atmosphere, the symbolic earthquake, but that there was a reason that one of the stars of the Triplos Asteri are embedded in our planet, and that is a huge cause of this earthquake. But we'll get to that. And but basically, the idea became that Now we had the divided states of America physically, literally. And people were like, hey, you know what? There's more people of my political, socio-political persuasion on this side. So I'm going to move over there. And people were like, well, I'm going to move over to the other side because there's too many people who think like this and I don't want to be around them, to move over to this side. And so bridges began to be built over this chasm all up and down. Dozens, hundreds of bridges began to be built, and people just use the bridges to move to the side of the country that most fit them. Yes, I know the thing that comes to mind is Democrat, Republican. We didn't want to play. We didn't want to play in that playground with Democrat, Republican. So we created two socio-political parties. I call them socio-political parties because the social nature of their belief system is the social nature of things are core to their belief systems, how they live with one another. And so they moved over to different sides, and the idea became that they were getting so extreme on these two sides of the country that we literally were on the verge of seceding from one another and being two different countries. However, about a third of the people didn't want that. So they began to move to the bridges and they began to build communities on these bridges to say, like, hey, we can coexist. We don't mind living next to someone who is different from me or has a different socio-political idea. We believe that a diversity of thought and a diversity of opinion and a diversity of passion is good for people, that we should have different things that we can discuss civilly, and that there are different people who have different needs. So you can't just say everybody's got to be like this, because then what about the people who don't have those same needs or same passions? So that's where Platinum City was born, from these little communities on these bridges. And then those communities began to build into neighborhoods, and more bridges were built, and until finally we have this giant city, of course, with the rise of hyper beings and technology that we could that the characters could use to help build this massive megalopolis that runs the entire length of the country. And now you kind of had three sections of the country. You had the West, you had the East, and you had Platinum City. And the West and the East are still very polarized. So so that's kind of where that idea came from.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, because I always thought it was one of the things I always thought was exceptionally interesting about that is you think about 9/11, right? Tragic, horrific event in our country's history. And, you know, obviously, rest in peace to anybody that was a casualty on that day from those events. But it brought the country together, right? It brought the nation together. And I felt like that was maybe the last time we were that unified as a nation, as a country. You know, you also hear it, right? Like, you know, what's one thing that could bring the whole world together? An alien invasion.
Alien invasion, right? Yeah.
Us versus them, right? That was kind of the sentiment on 9/11, was us versus our enemies, and it brought the nation together. But what's so interesting about Platinum City and the mythology and the lore behind it, when the earthquake happens, when the Great Quake happens, millions of people are killed by this natural disaster. You would think the country would come together like they did on 9/11, excuse me, and have this, you know, awakening. We are one nation. We are one people. We're all mourning. Excuse me, this thing happened. We all need to come together, reconnect and rebuild the country so we can grow back stronger. No, that did not happen. The two sides became more polarized. They saw the actual physical division of the country and said, that is exactly how I feel.
Right.
Let's exasperate that. right? Let's take this as an opportunity to continue driving towards breaking this nation up, breaking us into two. And so that's what's always been so interesting about Platinum City and the events surrounding it. When it should have brought everybody together in the Great Quake, it didn't.
It
Right?
did. No.
But because it didn't, like you said, the third of the people in the nation who really did see that event for what it was, a tremendous tragedy, and the fact that we all should come together, they took that opportunity to create the greatest, maybe, and not even just city, but architectural, economical, financial, social wonder, cultural wonder ever in the history of mankind. And Platinum City was born.
And not only that, but it was a symbol of unity. It's the biggest symbol. Don't build walls, build bridges. They built thousands of them.
Yeah.
Thousands of them, thousands of bridges, which initially were used to separate more people. Initially, the bridges was like, yeah, I could use this to get away from people who I don't believe in.
Yeah.
And then it became like this huge symbol of unity. And that's that ideal thing. That we, you know, I think most people in their heart of hearts want to live in a unified country.
Yeah.
Maybe the way they believe about going about getting it may not be agreeable to everyone. But I think if that's one thing that we want to put out in the world as we begin to build our story, as we begin to get more people to see the stories you're building, is that at the end of the day, yes, there's always going to be a conflict. Yes, there's always going to be things that we're going to disagree with. But is there some way that we can be unified in just basic compassion? Maybe we might have a chance to survive, because the sad thing is, since 2016, it just feels like we're getting further and further apart, and we're in an election year right now, and it feels like we're just so far apart. Just like you said, there was over the weekend. We're filming this over the day, the weekend, previous weekend. You know, there was the assassination attempt. And I look at it and I say, man, why have we been allowed to become such a violent, a politically violent country?
Yeah.
You know, and we can we can talk about all the different signs and the different ways our politicians speak nowadays, that maybe, you know, in our leaders, in our media, and et cetera, speak, that can be contributing to that. But man, if there's a way, you know, we were talking about balance also, right? Balance and harmony, and how so much of what's going on in the world feels like it's fighting against that. It's fighting against, even though I believe that the vast majority of people want to be in a peaceful world and want to be able to coexist. Why does it feel like we're talking? So that's kind of like the push and pull that we have so much fun kind of examining in these fictional stories. And that's always been the fun of sci-fi and fantasy, is to be able to kind of explore these big questions. But we really do think we have some pretty unique ways of approaching it that other stories haven't done it quite like this before.
Well, I mean, because and not to get into it too much, but like you said, it's not Democrat Republican, right?
Yeah.
Not. There's two separate sides, because there's two separate belief systems. One is we need safe spaces.
Like we need safe spaces.
Every group, every culture needs to have their own space designated to them to allow them to live, practice, and exist freely how they want to, without outside influence, without outside interruption. And then the other side is like, nah, no safe space. We all need to get down together,
aggressively. Yeah.
So talk. I mean, because this is your thing. So talk more about.
Yeah. It's a. So I'll go back even where that was inspired from. That general idea. The backstory of that is Christopher and I both went to Oberlin College. Oberlin College is is a small liberal arts school in Northeast Ohio. Extremely prestigious arts program, music program. Some of the most the music conservatory there is world renowned. If you've ever heard music, you've probably heard someone from Oberlin Conservatory of
Yeah.
Music. They play all the instruments. They write songs. Like it's just world renowned. Everything from Broadway to hardcore hip hop. There's people in
Everything.
Oberlin involved in it. Every genre, everywhere, all over the world. Oberlin is also very historic because it was the first college in the United States to admit Black people and the first college in the United States to admit women. It's a very old college, historically so. Not only that, some of the buildings in Oberlin actually have tunnels in it because it was used as part of the Underground Railroad. Some of the buildings were used as part of the Underground Railroad. So it's a very historic college. One of the things about Oberlin College was that it also, I don't know if it pioneered this in colleges, but they had dorms that were considered safe spaces. A safe space dorm was a dorm that was either culturally or socially monolithic. So, for example, African Heritage House, bunch of Black people lived in African Heritage House. There was Asia House, which was a place where a lot of people from Asian countries, like it was a very multicultural college, which it promoted, but it also had these safe spaces. You also had all women's dorms, which is not abnormal, but which is not abnormal for colleges. A lot of colleges have single sex dorms.
Yeah, dorms, yeah.
However, this was the only all women's dorm on our campus. We also had an all men's dorm, which was doubled as a athlete dorm. It was right across the way from the athletic complex. But the idea behind all these places, whether it was African Heritage House or Asia House or the athletes dorm or the all women's dorm or the hippie communes, we had a couple of those where if you wanted to be kind of all natural and grow your own food, it was a what was it called? Where they do their own food? Co-op, right? It was a co-op. And that was a place. So the idea was that you could coexist with everyone out in your classes and out in the community, but you could go home to somewhere that was just people who were like you, and there were special programs inside these houses too. So at African Heritage House, we would do a lot of history, like African American history programs and things to celebrate our culture. And the same thing happened in all the other houses. It was a place where you kind of let your hair down amongst your people. Now, I lived in African Heritage House. However, I knew some Black people who refused to live in African Heritage House and didn't even want to ever come to African Heritage House. Yeah. They believed that the idea of separating out from everybody and just being with your own people was terrible. It was blasphemous. It was like, no, we're supposed to be able to coexist. It's a multicultural class. And we'd be like, hey, no, we don't dislike other people. It's just we like to have a safe space where we could come and chill. And granted, the initial creation of the safe spaces, I believe, was to combat racism and places where people of color could just be like, you know what, it's a place where I can get away from some of the terrors that I face because of the color of my skin or my gender. And
which isn't anything new. I mean, you look at Garveyism versus the civil rights movement, right? Marcus Garvey was like, we all need to pick up and go back to Africa, go be amongst our people, right? Our own nation, our own nations, our own continent. And Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement was all about integrating. We all need to come together and live as equals, so there's a long history
of this discussion. This discussion and this argument. So we decided to base the socio-political aspects of Platinum City, of the divided states of America, around that idea. People who said we're going to live in communities that are very monolithic, that stems not just to race, but to religion and to, you know, like just different kinds of things like that, where it's like, yep, where we're going to live, and this is going to be this is going to be our place. The governments of that side of the United States also wanted to kind of, you know, separate but equal, which is a super loaded statement, because we said, well, we tried that.
Went. Yeah.
We saw how that went. But this community, this side of the United States, is like, we're going to aggressively police the idea that all of these communities are treated as equally as possible. Right. That they were not going to let, you know, the communities of just Black people get redlined into the ghetto, while the communities of white people get all the funds. Like, the governments on that side of the country were going to make sure everyone is agreed. Now, who knows how well that can work? And as we get into the stories, you know, we can see how that actually works.
Yeah.
Other side of and not only that, but then they would have these festivals where people could bring the things from their different cultures and share it with each other.
One giant
so it wasn't
mixer.
One giant cultural mixer. And then they could go back, just like Oberlin was, right? We could all come and have class together and eat together and all this stuff. And then we go back to our different houses, right? It wasn't no thing. Meanwhile, the other side of the country is very much like, no safe spaces, no safe spaces. They don't believe those are safe spaces. They believe that we build together with diversity of thought and diversity of person and a diversity of character and diversity of belief. And so they aggressively promote intermingling, even to the point where that side of the country doesn't even have singular denomination churches. Like, all the churches there on that side of the country are interfaith. All of the institutions are, you know, interracial and intermixed. So you can't find safe spaces on that side of the country, while you, on the other side of the country, you can't find a lot of intermingled communities. And so we presented this as a way where you can't just say Democrat, Republican. Now you have to think about, which side of the country would you live on?
Right.
You know, yeah. and granted, the easy answer for some people is like, well, I'll just go to Platinum City, because in Platinum City,
middle, it's both.
It's in the middle. It has all of that. You know, it has cultural centers, but it has intermingling, and it's all, you know, which is true. However, if you had to make a choice, which side of the country would you live on? And watching people try to process that is one of the joys of my life.
And give the what they think is the right answer, right? The PC answer that's not going to get them canceled or get them in trouble is
right.
Yeah, it's always entertaining.
It is, and it's so funny to watch two people who align with the same political and social values in the real world argue about which side of the country they would live on in this fictional world. That's the greatest thing. That was the whole point. It's like, how do we create something that people can't just say, oh, that's the bad side and that's the good side? Because if you did Democrat and Republican, half of this country right now would be able to say that's the bad side and that's the good side. And we didn't want that.
Yeah.
And I go back to this meeting that we had with this production company when we were pitching our story, when we were pitching our stories, and we were out in California, and we're pitching to this production company that's known for doing some things that you know, that you all would know. And we're sitting in this room with this, I think she was a Jewish woman from New York.
Yeah.
And she was probably in her mid-20s, maybe late 20s.
Yeah.
And she was an executive at this production company. And her assistant was this Black kid who was probably about 21.
Recent college grad. Yep.
Recent college grad. I think he was LA, or he was West Coast native.
Yeah, West Coast, yep.
But had some connection, had some roots in New York also. And we told him exactly what we just said to you. And she said, I would never live on a safe space those people, like they what those all those racist people don't want to live with people of their own of it. She was like, no, I'm living on this side of the country,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then the
She
dude,
chose
and then the
East Side. She was
dude,
East Side all the
she
way.
was East Side all the way. She was like, man, we are she was mad about the other
Yeah.
side. She was like, how
Yeah.
could they live like that, you know? And I think the young man, he was super um he was super into the mythology. He was into it, just loving it, just eating it up. He was a little bit more versed in sci-fi fictional stuff than she was, just a little bit more. But I think he chose Platinum City. He was like, no, I'd live
Yeah.
in the middle,
Right.
but I could see the appeal of both
Both
sides,
sides. Right.
very. So it was a great, so I mean, which side would y'all live on? Leave a comment.
Right.
leave
Comment.
a
Let us know.
comment
Where are
of
you going? You East
which
Sider?
side. You
Are
East
you a West
Side, where
Sider? Do you want
East
the
Side is the city where the cities where everything is mixed. West Side is all the segregated cities.
Yep. Or you Platinum City? Are you
Are
are
you
you are
Platinum
you
City?
out of are
Yep.
you out of the fight? You just want to live how you're living today? Are you Platinum City? Which choice are you
Yeah.
gonna choose?
So yeah, that was a whole lore video on its own right
I
there.
was gonna
And we
do it. I
get
was already thinking episode 2 was gonna be Platinum City lore,
Platinum
but
City, but
we
we
covered
kind of
it
got
here. It's
into it.
all
But
good.
yeah, but
We
we
got
could
enough
yeah, but
lore
we
and
could get
mythology for a
yeah.
dozen other videos
Yeah, so
anytime.
exactly, because we
So
haven't even gotten into some more of the details of Platinum City. But but yes, it was very something that we wanted to bring to the forefront of the discussion. And
yeah,
how do you interact with people who don't don't believe the same thing you believe, and how do you discern between people who genuinely care about you but just disagree, and people who mean you harm
yeah,
by their beliefs. The difference between, for as two African American men, the difference between that well-meaning white person that doesn't understand their blind spots, as opposed to a straight up racist. Like where
yeah, yeah,
people, and how do you like discern that, and how do you have that discussion? And we didn't want to do we have one character who's like a cartoon racist.
oh, Volar, for y'all who want to go look him up.
Volar, yeah, Volar is a cartoon racist, as in someone who is so over the top racist, that
Yeah,
it's troubling. But we also just wanted to be able to say, like, all right, let's have a discussion about, yeah, blind spots, and about the things that, while you may hold them dear to your heart, you may not understand how that affects other people.
yeah,
And the idea of, just because somebody else is given something doesn't mean it's being taken from
from
you.
you.
And how we hope to change that conversation with our stories, and say, like, listen, there's enough here for all of us to kind of get what we need.
Right.
But we don't have to say, well, if I have my way, that means other people can't have their way. There's I mean, again, call me idealistic, call me Pollyanna, call me, whatever it is. But, I believe that. I tell stories from a place of hope, I guess.
Yeah.
And
No, dude.
I think you do too.
Yeah. And realistically, I think there's more people in the middle or near the middle than there are on each side. I think there's just there's a lot of influences operating at the same time that magnifies elements of the extreme, elements
Mhm.
of the polarizing sides. Because we all have, it's an extremely nuanced conversation, and human beings are extremely complex, right? You can say, I sit here, but then there's this list of things that you also agree with that reside over here. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean that you're over there, right? But
Right. Mhm.
what that means is you're closer towards the middle than you are one of the opposite ends. And I think most
Mhm.
people are residing in our country are residing in that middle space.
Sure.
But the
Mhm.
media and you
And
know, and just like I said, all these influences and the
and
way
the fact that
it
we're forced
works,
to pick that we're forced to
you're
pick
forced
between
to pick. Yeah.
one of two parties or sides.
Right.
Now it's like, oh well, I voted for this person. Oh, so you must have all of these same beliefs,
Yep.
which of everyone else, and it's such much more nuanced, much more nuanced discussion.
Yeah.
But hey, polarization is profitable, so we won't. I guess we won't go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, that's a whole other rabbit hole to
That's
go
a whole
down.
other rabbit hole. So
I think, I mean, we really went after it with this one.
yeah,
There's
yeah.
there's a lot to chew on for
Hmm.
people when they watch this and think about it, talk about it, whatever. But
Yeah.
that was pretty much March.
Hmm.
We're going into
Yeah.
April next, which is a
Yeah.
whole
Which,
other it's on a
yeah.
whole other beat, but it's a whole other saga as well.
Uh,
Um,
Oh, oh, and that's when
so
we
yeah,
that's when we really get our first glimpse into like the epic kind of god tier stuff
yeah,
going on there.
the cosmic stuff going on.
Cosmic. That's where we
Yeah.
first get our first taste of the cosmic side of, because yeah, we start out April with the triplets, man, with the with the zip
If
triplets.
you thought Noble was going through it in the library, wait till
Uh,
you hear about what he was going
it's
through in the Temple of Ganunkin. It's about to go down.
about to go
It gets
down.
thick. So we're gonna wrap
Yeah,
up. Thank you everyone again for joining us. We're gonna come back next episode, keep it rolling with the month of April and all the craziness that goes on
yeah.
there. But I'm Christopher Igpo, aka The Artista.
I'm Stefan Thomas, aka the Abbott, and visit the website
Yes.
www.thecreativeextreme.com. We didn't pimp that the last couple of episodes. www.thecreativeextreme.com. All of these stories are on there, so you
Yeah.
could jump in and really have a good time. We think.
Yeah. Go to the website, tell your mama about it, tell your daddy about it, your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, all your best friends. Tell them to tell everybody about it. Like, subscribe, comment, share, all that social media stuff. But again, thanks for joining us. We're gonna get back at you soon with episode 4. All right.
All right, take care. Peace.